What's up, guys? So, the Municipality of Anchorage has sold their soul to the Zionist entity, right? And Anchorage prides itself on diversity, having the three most diverse high schools in the nation: East High, Bartlett High, West High, right? But here's the thing: the Municipality of Anchorage is trying to use diversity as a facade for genocide, imperialism, and settler colonialism. Let's get to the facts, right? In this resolution, the Municipality of Anchorage is trying to play both sides on a genocide, right? You cannot be neutral on a moving train. The Municipality of Anchorage is guilty of playing both sides on a genocide. Zionist squatters are foreign terrorist invaders. And if the Municipality of Anchorage were to address the question of settler colonialism, the question of genocide, and the question of imperialism, the Municipality of Anchorage would have to assess their own relationship to the Dena'ina Athabascan people. And why is that? Well, the Municipality of Anchorage is built on stolen Dena'ina Athabascan land. The Takotnu region, also known as Cook Inlet, is Dena'ina land. Anchorage, and Alaska in general, is kind of a colonial outpost for the U.S. empire that was built on stolen Athabascan land. And in the case of Takotnu, it was built on the land of the Eklutna Dena'ina Athabascan people. And if you want to know how colonial in nature Anchorage is, go to downtown. Go to Government Hill. Do you want to know what's next to Government Hill? Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. That's an outpost of U.S. imperialism, right? Also, the fact that if you go to Midtown, you see all the oil executive buildings. Those are outposts of U.S. imperialism. Those are outposts of the ruling class, of capitalism, built on land that was stolen from the Dena'ina Athabascan people, right? And again, I'm a Gusuk, right? My ancestors came from Asia and from Europe. So I'm not an Alaskan, right? I was born and raised in Alaska, but I am of foreign ancestry. I am technically a foreign invader, right? I am not built for Alaska. If you look at gene polymorphism, skeletal structure, nutritional needs, right? Specifically, if you look at ACTN3, if you look at ADRB2, to a lesser extent ACE, and if you look at skeletal structure, right? I'm a long-limbed, fast-twitch guy. I am not built for subpolar continental climates, right? People like me who are of foreign ancestry are basically foreign invaders, whether we were born here or not. Why? The settler never becomes native to the land they settle. The settler never becomes native to the land they settle. And if Anchorage really wanted to address the genocide, settler colonialism, and imperialism in Palestine, a country where about 15% of my ancestry is from, they would have to address the genocide, settler colonialism, and imperialism in their own backyard against the Dena'ina Athabascan people, right? That's what the Municipality of Anchorage would have to do. Because it's quite frankly a colonial relationship, a settler colonial imperialist relationship, right? The Takotnu region is Athabascan land. Let's not make any mistakes about it, right? And again, this is a mistake that Midwest Marks frequently makes, and we're going to break down a whole video of a discussion with Noah Hrachvik and Matt Hunter sometime this week. but I just thought I'd make this video before I get back to my cleanup chores. But if the municipality of Anchorage were actually to address the question of settler colonialism, the question of genocide in Palestine, settler colonialism in Palestine, and imperialism in Palestine, it would have to assess J-Bear and J-Bear's role as a colonial outpost in the municipality of Anchorage, in the Anchorage Bowl. It would have to assess Anchorage's role as a settler colony and Anchorage's role of imperialism and genocide against the Dena'ina Athabascan people. Again, leaders in Anchorage love to talk about diversity. By the way, the reason why Anchorage is diverse is because of U.S. imperialism, right? The Hmong community in Anchorage collaborated with the CIA during the Vietnam War, right? A lot of the Samoan communities from American Samoa, right? There's a Hawaiian community and a Tongan community that came here. Why? Because of U.S. imperialism, right? And the U.S. empire needed laborers for its imperial project. You have Sudanese from Sudan, right? You have Sudanese from Khartoum who were refugees, who came to Anchorage because they fought against the U.S. Same with the Somali community in Anchorage. They're refugees from U.S. imperialism. But then the Sudanese from down in Juba, they were U.S. collaborators, right? And then you also have Albanians from Albania who were anti-U.S. and Albanians from so-called Kosovo, which is really just Albania, who are U.S. collaborators in Anchorage, right? Living in Anchorage. And then you also have Koreans who are U.S. collaborators in Anchorage. The Filipinos, U.S. collaborators. Germans, settlers, right, who settled in the Midwest and in Pennsylvania and then came up to Anchorage, right? You have, what other groups do you have? Hmong and Lao collaborated with the CIA during the Vietnam War, right? So a lot of the diversity in Anchorage is a byproduct of U.S. imperialism. And we can't forget the Puerto Ricans and Dominicans who were forced to come to the United States because of U.S. imperialism in the Caribbean, right? The Mexicans, Salvadorians, Guatemalans, Hondurans, Peruvians, all forced up to the States because of U.S. imperialism, right? So Anchorage's diversity is a byproduct of U.S. imperialism, right? Because the English and now the Irish and German ruling class of Anchorage, because that's basically what the ruling class of Anchorage is, English, German, and Irish. And after that, I would say like Russian and Polish and Ukrainian, including many Ashkenazi Jews, the Green family, Ruskin family, Gottstein family, right? That's the rule. And then you got the Germans, the Sullivan, or Germans, the Salts are Irish, are they? Well, you have some Germans as well. And then you have some Irish, like the Sullivans, both Sullivan families, both the Dan Sullivans, right? And then, yeah. And who else is part of the ruling class that is? Oh, Daniel Voland, Anchorage Assembly, German ruling class, right? If I thought Dustin Darden, is he German? I believe so. But he's part of the ruling class, right? Like, Anchorage's diversity is a byproduct of U.S. imperialism and the settler colony's necessity to bring workers for their settler colonial project. You have to think about that in that way. Because Anchorage loves to tout its diversity, but it doesn't tell you about the nefarious, imperialist, genocidal reason why Anchorage is diverse, right? The fact that the U.S. was doing all these war crimes and genocides and invasions and imperialisms overseas and the fact that the U.S. settler colony needed settlers for their workforce. So the reason is twofold, right? And if the municipality of Anchorage really examined that, they would have to examine their whole existence and cede the entire Takatnu region to the Dena'ina community. That's what they would have to do, right? And again, I support land back 100%. Like genetically, I'm not built for Alaska. I'm not built for the Americas. I am built for Asia, and I'm built for Europe, right? You're talking about, when we're talking about skeletal structure, long-limbed, mesomorphic, and fast twitch, right? When we're talking about gene polymorphisms, ACTN3, ADRB2, ACE, right? I'm not built for Alaska. I'm built for places like Baghdad, Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, Ale, Daliat al-Karmal, al-Khalil, places of that nature, right? Cardiff, to a lesser extent, but not really, right? Mostly in terms of skeletal structure, circadian rhythms. Rhythms is another thing. I need consistent daylight year-round. I'm not genetically built for large fluctuations in daylight, which is what, the subpolar continental climate of Anchorage has, right? Like when you look at science, skeletal structure, gene polymorphisms, Bergman's rule, which states that those who are closer to the equator have less body fat and longer limbs, and are shorter, and those farther away from the equator are more endomorphic, higher body fat percentage, and taller. When you look at those things, right? Bergman's rule, Allen's rule, which is Allen's rule is about the limb length. Closer to the equator is longer limbs, farther from the equator is shorter limbs, right? When you look at skeletal structure, gene polymorphisms, and apply Bergman's rule and Allen's rule, then you'll see that settler colonialism makes absolutely no sense scientifically and is bad for health and bad for science and bad for athletic performance, right? So, and Anchorage's diversity was all manufactured by settler colonialism and imperialism, right? Anchorage's diversity is a byproduct of U.S. imperialism and settler colonialism, right? That's what Anchorage's diversity is. And let me tell you, a large percentage of the Black community are imperialist collaborators. A lot of these military people from down south, from Texas and Louisiana, North Carolina, the U.S. state of Georgia, right? Because there's Georgia in the Caucasus Mountains, and then there's the U.S. state of Georgia, right? So a lot of these southern troglodytes, whether they be black or white, that come up because they're at J-Bear, they're agents of U.S. imperialism and settler colonialism, man. That's what they are. If Anchorage wanted to address the settler colonialism, genocide, and imperialism in Palestine, the municipality of Anchorage would have to address their own settler colonialism, imperialism, and genocide against the Athabascan people, against the Dena'ina Athabascan people in the Takatnu region on Dena'ina Elena, right? You have to understand that, right? Again, Anchorage's diversity all stems from imperialism and settler colonialism, right? Imperialism and settler colonialism is literally why Alaska has diversity in the first place and why Anchorage has the 3 most diverse high schools in the United States, right? So Anchorage, the municipality of Anchorage, Mayor Dave Bronson and the entire assembly, by the way, the assembly just renamed the port of Anchorage after Don Young, who was racist to Mexicans and a Zionist and an imperialist and an Islamophobe, right? If the Anchorage Assembly wanted to address genocide, settler colonialism, and imperialism, U.S. imperialism and Zionist imperialism in Palestine, they would then have to look at U.S. and English settler colonialism and imperialism and genocide against the Dena'ina Athabascan people in Anchorage, Alaska, in the land known as Eklutna, right? Dena'ina Elena, they call it, right? So, again, that's just a material fact, man. That's all it is a material fact of the matter. And this is why I will not be voting in this year's spring elections for mayor or for the assembly, because all the options are a bunch of Zionists and a bunch of settler colonial genocidal maniacs. And I'm saying this as someone who is a settler, right? The settler never becomes native. The settler is not genetically adapted to the land, in most cases, to the land which they settle, right? They are not genetically adapted to the land which they settle, right? And that's why they exploit the resources and they exploit the native people, right? Anchorage's diversity stems from settler colonialism, genocide, and imperialism. That's what it stems from. And the Municipality of Anchorage has to take a good look at Palestine and the genocide and settler colonialism and imperialism going on there, and then take a good look at its own genocide, imperialism, settler colonialism. You know, the fact that there are all these oil offices in Midtown, the fact that J-Bear is on the northern border of the municipality next to Government Hill and Mountain View and Fairview and Muldoon, right? The fact that the Native Heritage Center is literally next to J-Bear, right? You go like you're going to the Ticonderoga Mall, and like it's right, the Native Heritage, and then you turn in like you're going to Bartlett, right? And the Native Heritage Center is right there, like right next to J-Bear, right? Right next to J-Bear, like as if the contradictions don't contradict themselves in such a stark way. You know what I mean? As if the contradiction couldn't be more stark enough, right? So, like, that's literally the epitome of like the contradictions of the imperialist, genocidal, settler, colonial entity that we know as the United States, right? And I want to say shame on Yusuf Barbour and the Barbour family in Anchorage for selling out to the Zionist entity, vilifying Hamas. Yusuf Barbour is just another colonial puppet. That's all he is. So shame on the assembly, shame on Yusuf Barbour, shame on the municipality. And that's all I have to say, man. Anchorage needs to examine the role of genocide, settler colonialism, and imperialism in its own diversity, and its own population, and its own history, and its own municipality and city, and examine the role of genocide, settler colonialism, and imperialism in Palestine. So that's all I have to say now, but we'll see you with the next video. Peace.